Applicants with homebuyer projects involving new construction or the purchase of existing units for rehabilitation and resale to eligible homebuyers must complete a homebuyer development worksheet. The department has a required template that applicants must download from the trust fund webpage. The completed worksheet must be uploaded to the application as an Excel. Do not turn it into a PDF. It must be uploaded as an Excel. The completed worksheet will be used by the department to underwrite the project. Begin by filling out the first tab named App Info. The information provided on the first tab will ensure proper function of the second tab. The example we will walk through is a homebuyer new construction project that will be requesting trust fund for new construction and homebuyer assistance. This project already owns the sites they will be building on. This slide shows key figures needed to complete the worksheet. As you can see, the applicant is ABC Housing. They will construct 6 units and sell them to eligible homebuyers that are making at or below 120% average median income for the county the units are in. Both the construction and the sale of the units must take place prior to the end of the contract period. The project team must keep this in mind when they are structuring their program and the number of units they are planning to construct. You can see here that the market value and sale price are being estimated. They are on the same line because the department's preference is to have the sale price set at market value. We prefer that the trust fund units not be sold by artificially reducing the sale price below the market value, as this could have a negative impact on future neighborhood comps in that area. This project is estimating that their 120% AMI home buyer may need up to $60,000 per unit in order to afford the $310,000 sale price for a trust fund unit. They are also setting aside another funding source equal to $2,000 per unit for homebuyer assistance. This means they are budgeting a total of $62,000 in homebuyer assistance per unit. This project is also estimating that the affordable mortgage for the AMI they are targeting is $248,000. ABC Housing is familiar with selling houses in their community and are using their experience and conversations with real estate professionals to settle on a projected seller cost expense of 6% of the sale price. Therefore, $18,600 per unit is being estimated as the seller closing cost per unit. The applicant is committing $50,000 total as cash match to be used on the new construction activity. This slide is showing the applicant's trust fund budget, which they are planning to submit with the full application. They will use these numbers when completing the worksheet as well. However, once the numbers are plugged in, the applicant may discover they need to adjust their request. The next slides will walk through the input into the homebuyer development worksheet using the figures that have been discussed on this slide and the previous one. Okay, so once you have entered the homebuyer development worksheet, you want to be sure to start with the app info page. That's the first sheet that you can see when you open it up. And you will just simply start to fill in the applicant name. And in the case of our example, it is ABC Housing. Also, this particular example does not have a for-profit owner developer, so please leave this blank. If you do put a name in there, it does change some of the fields that are found in the second tab, the Homebuyer Development Worksheet tab. So you must leave this blank if the applicant is going to be owning the units that are going to be sold to an eligible homebuyer, or if you are an applicant with a purchase rehab resale program. Next, you're going to put the application name. This will be how you have named your application, following the naming protocol, of course. So this is an example. This is a homebuyer project new construction with homebuyer assistance. Here is a toggle for the project type. We're going to choose new construction. If you choose purchase, rehab, resale, it does change some of the fields in the homebuyer development worksheet. So be sure you are filling this out correctly. Then you can give the project location, the city and county where the units are going to be located. We'll just say it's at Grow here in Washington County. Then you can just finish by including the name of the person filling out this development worksheet and whatever date they want to use as having filled it out. So that's all that you have to do on the first sheet. Now we've moved to the Homebuyer Development Worksheet's second tab, where the section Sources and Uses is being shown. You can see that sources is across the top on this table and uses are going down the side. I also want to bring your attention to scrolling over to the far right hand side. You will see instructions. They are listed section by section and line by line. Column A here is showing some small gray numbers, and these numbers correspond to the instructions. Everywhere that there is a small gray number on this worksheet, there is a field that can or should be filled in depending on the various parameters of your project, and the instructions should guide you. So line 1 is the new construction activity, and I've pre-filled in some of the numbers. For this example, the ABC Housing is going to request $350,000 in trust fund, $50,000 in match. And for homebuyer assistance, they are planning to request $360,000. This is a 6-unit project, so that is $60,000 per unit that they are going to budget for, thinking that the 120% or below AMI that they are targeting may need $60,000 at least in trust fund in order to make this unit affordable. There are no acquisition, demolition, or infrastructure improvement costs in this project, but if they were, and let's say they were asking for $10,000 in acquisition, that opens up space for a match to also be put in or any other sources. And the same happens if you request anything for demolition or infrastructure. That will open up these grayed boxes. If you have a trust fund request, then you can also put match towards it. Then farther down here in administrative activities, 6, 7, and 8, these are allowances that the department has determined can be requested to help support staff costs that are associated with administering a state-funded project. And applicants can review their application guidelines for more information on the caps that are related to these particular administrative activities. The housing management for this project is going to ask for $30,000. This is $5,000 per unit. And in general administration, they're going to ask for $20,000. You can see by the drop-down box, their choices were 0, 5, 10, 15, or 20. Now also, under homebuyer assistance, they have another fund that they can use up to $2,000 per unit. So for a total of $12,000 in other sources, they are going to put those in there in case their applicants need $62,000 per unit in homebuyer assistance in order to make it affordable. So now the sources and uses budget has been produced, but we move over here to the other sources table, which corresponds with column E, other sources. And you can see, as I'm going to scroll down here, there's been a red banner that appears that says revise other sources. The reason that is appearing is because the total of other sources, here it's J19, is not equal to E17. So we have to remedy that so that this box turns green. The $12,000 and other sources needs to be identified as to what type of source and whether or not any of that source has to be paid back using proceeds during the course of the project. So we're going to put that $12,000 is coming from a community investment in the project and that they need that paid back. If it is used, they need it paid back after sale of a unit. Is going to be paid back using the proceeds from the sale of the unit. That, of course, will reduce the amount of proceeds that is going to revolve and be used for the next unit. If they are not needing to be paid back and it was an award, then you will see in the cash flow that there's more cash available at the end of the project because of any sources that you receive that don't require repayment. This example, though, is going to show repayment of the source. You can see here the box is turned green because this is in balance now with column E. This line number 9 is when there is home buyer assistance being used in the project. You are going to declare whether it is going to be forgivable to the home buyer or unforgivable. If your project is structured to give 50% forgivable homebuyer assistance and 50% paid back at title transfer, then still choose forgivable because a portion of it is being forgiven. And that concludes our look at Section 1, Sources and Uses.
A note regarding tax increment financing, or TIF, as a source of funding in the home buyer project. TIF should not be documented as a source if it has not been committed prior to the application submission. If it is uncommitted, the applicant should provide an explanation in the application question that is specifically asking about any uncommitted sources. This development worksheet should only be used to show committed sources. So only build your worksheet based on committed sources. If TIF does end up being approved after an award is announced, the applicant can work with the department to document the TIF as a source of funding in the project. Now, TIF also should not be documented as a source of funding if the commitment is not structured as a direct funding source that helps cover the hard cost of constructing the units, or perhaps is a direct source of homebuyer assistance, or a direct source of funding for acquisition or demolition or infrastructure improvements. If TIF has been awarded or committed to this project prior to application submission, the applicant should upload the evidence of this commitment and give a detailed explanation for how the TIF will be applied to the project. This information can be uploaded in the applicant specific upload section of the application.
Now we're looking at Section 2, the development cost schedule. This is not the detailed development cost schedule that returning applicants might be used to seeing from past, but this template has been built to create a cash flow that shows how the trust funds revolve throughout the project by being reinvested as revolving proceeds. Line 21, acquisition costs. You can see here that this is grayed out. The reason this is grayed out is because up above in Section 1, there is no acquisition being requested in trust fund. So only if there is trust fund being invested in the project will you need to ask for the trust fund. And I'll show an example here. If we put $10,000 in there, it opens up that field here for you to put $10,000 in. And this is all units across all units. But as we had discussed earlier in this presentation, there are no acquisition costs being asked for. So that is not being taken into as a factor in this development cost schedule. Instead, the new construction costs
This would be soft costs and hard costs that it's going to take to build this new unit, but do not include the developer fee. The developer fee is going to be based off of the total development cost. So for 6 units that were going to be built at around $300,000 per unit, the total cost was $1,800,000. Now this per unit column will be calculated once we go over here to the side where it's unit description. And line 23, we're going to put in the number of units for our project, the number of bedrooms, and the number of bathrooms that are in the design that we're going to be using. Now, if this is a purchase, rehab, resale project, you would use your estimate using your experience, perhaps, or what you estimate will be the average home that you will be purchasing for rehab. And so you would just input something there, but use your average. And you can see here a per unit cost is being calculated. This is using the per unit subsidy limit from the HUD Home Subsidy Table. You can see here there is a tab for that. This is just informational purposes only. It shows that a 2-bedroom is $252,993.60. So that is why that number is here, because you have put in 2 bedrooms. And then this green box that has showed up here is the amount of the trust fund divided by the 6 units. So the trust fund request divided by the 6 units. This amount to make the calculation does not include the administrative allowances, but only the hard and soft costs that are being requested. So if, for instance, you were trying to do only 2 units with the amount of request you gave, that would make a red flag and say you're you're not doing enough units, or you're asking for too much trust fund. But this one is doing 6 units, and it stays within the subsidy per unit level. So that concludes looking at section 2 of the development cost schedule. Now we're taking a look at section 3, project financial details. On line 26, you can see this is for the appraisal market value or sales price, and we explained earlier how it's important to set the sales price at the market value. Here, the $310,000, which was a part of our project summary, if you recall, $310,000 is the sale price that we were figuring on. Then the total down payment and closing costs. You input the amount into line 27 of what the trust fund is figuring to use per unit. $60,000 is the number that they were expecting to budget for homebuyer assistance using trust fund. The other sources, which we had a total of $12,000, which is $2,000 per unit, is automatically input using what you had put into sources and uses in section 1. If there is a homebuyer deposit that is expected as part of your program, like for instance, $1,000 cash put down as a deposit, then that would also be factored in by entering that amount in a per unit basis right here. Next, we had already decided $248,000 was the targeted mortgage, so you input that. If you input something more than that in this situation, you will see that a red flag appears saying you cannot exceed $248,000. The reason is 310 minus 62,000 is 248,000. So it's going to right size your mortgage. Now you can put a smaller amount if you believe that after applying 20% in homebuyer assistance, there still isn't enough, and that you're going to have to apply a affordability subsidy to the homebuyer as well. Then you might be targeting a mortgage of $240,000, which will then factor in an affordability subsidy of $8,000 per unit, and that will also be put into the cash flow, which we will look at next. The last thing is selecting the percent of seller costs.
This is a percent of the sales price and determining how much you're going to have to pay in seller costs when you sell to the eligible home buyer. In this project, we're choosing 6%. And oftentimes, if it's a purchase, rehab, resale project, you might even be choosing 0% because oftentimes you already have the eligible home buyer chosen and there are not realtor costs, or sometimes the applicant organization, the nonprofit, chooses to not factor in any seller costs. So that is up to you to put in the percent that you think is going to come out, and that will affect the proceeds at the end of the sale. On line 31, over on the right-hand side, you can see a box that is talking about the targeted developer fee. For new construction homebuyer projects, the department has a target of 10% in the developer fee. If you remember, the developer fee is a fee that's providing a compensation for taking on the work and risks that are associated with developing a project. Such work might include creating the project concept, identifying the sites, seeking construction financing, and securing other funding sources. And of course, the developer fee also is a cushion that if you have not estimated costs correctly, then some of those costs might be taken care of at the end of the project through what's left over in the developer fee. There's also a line 31 that allows an entry of a percent here showing an amount of developer fee, an amount of the 10% allowed that could be dispersed at unit sale. This is primarily to be used only if there is a for-profit that is going to own the units, and they are looking to or needing to have a portion of the developer fee because of the timing. Maybe they are in need of having this developer fee paid out in increments so that they can take care of their overhead costs. So this is something that you would work out with them in your developer agreement. But if you are the applicant that is also going to own the units and sell them to the eligible home buyer, the department wants you to use the 100% default that is already set there and not fill in this field. This is going to be just like when we had developer fee as a trust fund budget item. We would never pay out the developer fee until the end of the project after all units are completed and have been sold to an eligible home buyer. So the default is 100% if you're the applicant and you're owning the units for sale to eligible home buyers. Please leave it at 100% default. I'm going to put this mortgage back up to $248,000, which is what the project parameters had been, so I don't show this affordability subsidy. And that is going to be the end of our discussion on Section 3, Project Financial Details. Now that all input numbers have been completed in Sections 1 through 3, the project cash flow has been created. I'll walk through the different rows just for the column Unit 1 to give a basic overview of how the cash flow works. So you can see cost to construct under Unit 1, $300,000 has come down and been input in there from our input up above. The match has been evenly distributed. I know in reality, we proportion the match by the amount of trust fund that's expended. But if we did do that, it still ends up with a final amount net sales revenue about very close to the same. So just for the ease of this cash flow, we've distributed it evenly. You can see here in the first green row, the trust fund subsidy that's needed is calculated as $291,667. And when you add that to the match amount, it comes up to $300,000. So you use those two sources to construct. The next other sources is empty because there were no other sources being used for new construction. There is no funding gap because there was enough to construct the $300,000 home. And the appraisal sales price then came down to $310,000 from your input up above. Under homebuyer assistance, The 62,000 was input from what you provided up above. And the home buyer assistance line is the trust fund, 60,000. The next line is the home buyer assistance of 2,000. That was calculated from the 12,000 total other sources for that activity. This example did not have anything in the home buyer deposit, cash deposit area, and the home buyer mortgage amount that was input above was $248,000, and there was no affordability subsidy. The last section is sales revenue. So the $310,000 is how much the cost of the home, and then the seller cost was at 6% of that sales price, or $18,600. So that'll be deducted from the price of the home. And so there was no affordability, and there was no home buyer assistance being taken out of proceeds, and there was no developer fee being distributed after the sale of the unit. So the amount that the seller should walk away with at closing is $291,400. And that $291,400 then goes on to be in this row called revolving sales revenue. You can see under Unit 2 that now you have those project sales revenue proceeds to use to construct the second unit and some match. So there's very little trust fund needed at that point, and so on and so forth until you get through Unit 6. And after you sell Unit 6, what is remaining is the $291,400. I'm going to take just a moment to show you what it would look like if a funding gap was showing up after you had input all your sources. So at the top, if we had thought we might be able to do this with $200,000 in trust fund. So this was our starting sources and uses budget. When we got down to the cash flow, there would be monies here showing in the funding gap. And you'd be able to see how much total, either by scrolling all the way over to the end and seeing you have $93,000 gap. And another place will be the section that we'll be reviewing next, and it says funding gap $93,000. You do not want to hand in a worksheet that has a funding gap. So you have to take care of that. And the easy way to do that at first is to take that up. It could go up to $293,000 and $293,000, and you'll be able to see that that funding gap went away. And now we're going to take a look at the financial summary. It's taking what has been figured in the cash flow and giving a summary in 3 different tables. I've already showed you what the funding gap, when it shows up, what it looks like over here in Table C, and that is a signal that you need to adjust your sources so that you have enough sources to cover the project. Table A is the revenue summary. It shows the final unit sales proceeds, and it's also including the administrative allowances after that, just to give a total idea of what revenue is coming into the recipient. Now, the department is fully aware that the housing management cost a lot of times is expended with some of the soft costs needed for the development, and the general admin is often expended on staff time. It's an allowance for the staff time to complete reports and to manage, administrate the project within Amplifund and those things. But it's a place to give kind of a summary of what is all coming out in this project. So you can see that the last number in the units after Unit 6 is $291,400 is remaining. If you took this all the way over to the total, a total of $1,748,400 is the total amount of proceeds that came in after selling all 6. But of course, you used those proceeds for the project and fused them as a source in constructing all of the units. So the sales revenue after the final sale is $291,400. And if you remember, we had $12,000 needing to be paid back after the home buyer assistance had been used. And so they pay that back from the proceeds.
So the actual proceeds remaining is at $279,400. This essentially is the developer fee. It is, that amount that is used to, like we discussed above, the amount that's used to take care, to cover some of the risk, and also when costs maybe go over the amount originally planned, and also anything that maybe is over that 10% recommended developer fee, we hope will be used in the furtherance of the housing development projects that an organization might be doing. So budget review is the second table there, and you can see a red flag. There's a red box. It says $57,000. So budgeted was $350,000 in trust fund, and actual need was $293,000. So it's showing that you're asking for $57,000 more than is actually needed based on the numbers that were input. So in order to adjust this, we would go up to our original sources and uses, and we'd have to subtract that $57,000 because you actually only need to be asking $293,000 in new construction activity. Now, once we kind of adjust that, it makes that red flag go away, and it does not affect the amount of proceeds that revolve through the project. There's still $291,400. So the amount of trust fund needed is less, but you still are going to have the same amount in the revenue summary table. So that concludes the look at the financial summary, section 5.
Please pause and review the information on this slide regarding the development cost schedule and estimating the new construction costs on line 22. If you have any questions regarding this slide or the Homebuyer Development Worksheet in general, please reach out to your housing program representative.